May all beings be happy, may all beings be healthy, may all beings be free from harm, may all beings love life, may all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Joe Cohen. He's a very fine guitarist and sitar player, but he's been more involved with singing recently, as you'll learn, and came to Zen Center while Shunryu Suzuki was still alive. And we'll hear more from him about all that. And you'll hear Joe talking about his high-end audio business. Mainly he talked about speaker cables, but looking at his site, the Lotus Group, Breathing Life into Music, Lotus Group USA.com, it's got all sorts of stuff that's quite mysterious. This is just part one. And next week I'm going to put up part two. Joe Cohen. Next week's going to be about music. We do quite a bit of audiophile stuff in this one. Next week will be mainly music, but audiophile stuff and stuff, a little bit about his wife, Dario, who is a jazz singer. I'm going to say one thing. I took off the podcast with Robert Anderson at his request. He listened to it and said, one thing he said, I'm not really a psychoanalyst. And then he started noticing other things. And so I said, all right, I'll take it off. Something I added to Jerry Bollock's podcast from last week, which wasn't there at first, was that he has a blog site, jerrybollock.blogspot.com, JERRYBOLICK, blogs.blogspot.com, and that's the name of it is Meditation in the Slow Lane, and that's a blog for his poetry. Oh, and I wanted to say something I noticed today. Katrinka and I took a walk to a nearby pharmacy with our doggy, Bandita, and she said that our street, not the one we live on, but the one it goes on to, the one we live on is sort of like an alley. The one it goes into, she said, they need sleeping police. Policitor. And that's a speed bump. Or actually, they do have speed bumps here and there in neighborhoods, but speed humps are much better. Speed bumps should be illegal because they're hard on axles and on riders and cars. But the humps are the ones that are more gradual. She said, yeah, people are going down there too fast. So maybe I'll mention that to kind of get that to the local Banjar, the neighborhood little governance group. And they sort of run neighborhoods here. And then she said, well, I wonder what the speed limit is. And then we both realized something. We have never seen a posted speed limit anywhere in Bali. And I've never seen or heard of anybody getting a moving violation. And you know what? People are pretty, as far as I'm concerned, the people here are good drivers. They're considerate, and traffic is very cooperative. And society is very cooperative, and I don't know, it does it pretty much without police. They just seem to check people's registration to see if they're driving legally. And they used to ticket a lot of foreigners. But when Joe Cohen came in as president, about 8 years ago, he made things a lot better and eliminated a lot of graft. And that I just don't hear about that like I used to. The motorcycle cops disappeared from the tourist area once they got word they couldn't take bribes. And I remember I 5 years ago I had to go to my landlord took me to a police station because I had to report a lost bank card. It actually wasn't lost. I just never used it, so I cut it up and threw it away. Well, it turned out I had a bank account, but I just never used it. But then when I wanted to use it, they asked me for my card, and I didn't have it. So I did learn that I should not say I destroyed it and threw it away. That would be bad. I say, I lost it. Where did you lose it? I don't know. And so, anyway, when I'm talking to the officer, it was all easy, and it was all in Indonesian and very friendly. There was a big sign behind him that said, "This officer cannot receive money." And I thought that was pretty neat. Anyway, so if you drive here, be sure not to break the speed limit. So look, just as soon as we've had our pause to meditate, we'll give Joe Cohen a call and hear what he has to say. So when you hear the bell, if you're of such a mind, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you want. And when you're through, hit unpause. And we'll be there to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever. And we'll give Joe Cohen a call.
Hello?
Hey, Joe.
Hold on just a second. Give me a second here. David?
Yes.
Hi, I can hear you loud and clear now.
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. You know, it's been a long journey, man.
Yeah, I guess we could say that. Yeah.
Wow.
What are you up to?
Oh, my goodness. I'm married. I have a 30, how is he, 30, it's going to be 33-year-old son who is on a track to become a PhD in mathematics.
Uh-huh.
My wife is a professional vocalist. She toured for 10 years with Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks.
Oh, love him.
Yeah. Yes, so I got to know Dan pretty well before he passed.
Oh, that was a tragedy.
Wonderful, lot of stories about him. You know, he was really quite a character.
Yeah.
And she's also a jazz vocalist, and she's a teacher, all of those things. My profession is I design and manufacture high-end cabling and accessories for audio equipment for hi-fi nuts. I also import and distribute stuff in the same field. I'm practicing Tai Chi pretty seriously. I studied with a guy named Bob Amaker many years ago in Mill Valley, and then he came back. He had taught in Russia and in Hawaii, and then he came here for a while, and then he passed away a year and a half ago, and his wife is carrying on. He had a much younger wife, and she's a Russian, and she's a fantastic teacher. I'm studying North Indian classical vocal music. I've been a lifelong student of music, of Indian music in particular. You know, I played the sitar when I was at Zen Center.
Yeah.
But these past years, I really haven't had the use of my hands. You know, I have arthritis. I have probably carpal tunnel, and I have trigger fingers. I have all these things going on in my hands that preclude me from playing an instrument. I studied with Zakir Hussain for tablas for about 30 years. And then at a certain point along the way, I just really had this desire to play melody again. And I picked up the 5-string banjo and started working on that pretty seriously. And then one day I was practicing, and this is a little painful. Let's give it a rest. And rest didn't solve the problem. And so I thought, well, what can I do? And so I've been studying singing, and that's a real challenge, especially for someone who isn't naturally gifted with a nice voice.
Huh.
How about you? I mean, how did you end up in Bali? That's so exotic and wonderful.
My mother died after a inspiring life and death, and at the age of 98, and got all that in order. And my mate Katrinka, now my wife Katrinka's ex-husband died, who she was responsible for. He was in a convalescent home. And so I said to her, well, we're sort of free now, and we've got a little money. If we go to Asia, it will last a lot longer. So we did, and we chose Bali.
Well, Bali, of all the places on the planet, seems one of the most magical. I'd love to visit there someday. So it's still affordable for an expat to live there?
Yeah, it's getting more expensive, but some people are saying it's as expensive as Thailand, but it depends on what you know. It's like, we lived in Marin and Sonoma, very, very expensive places to live. And, knew a lot of people who did and didn't have the incomes that people think of as needed to live there. So, we get by fine here. Look, it's the way I see it is it's a good place to live, but I wouldn't want to visit here. It's just so crowded, and but there's still dances and music and all of that stuff. We only see if there's somebody visiting that wants to see it, because we've seen it enough, and then now and then we'll see some of it again, or see something more esoteric. I've got a song about it called Bali Go Down, which is based on something Katrinka said. She said one day they're gonna build one building too many, lay one brick too many, and the island's gonna sink into the ocean. And I thought, oh, that's a great image.
Wow.
And they just new cards keep coming on all the time. They keep wanting more and more tourists. Of course, COVID slowed things down. It was paradise during COVID, but sort of guilty paradise, because it was hard on a lot of people.
For sure.
Very hard on a lot of people. And it was sort of, actually our expenses didn't go down because we had to help a lot of people.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
Well, listen, I'm honored that you thought of me, and it's been so long. I mean, I came to Zen Center. That's 53 years ago, I think.
yeah, tell me about it.
Well, so I mean, the roots of it go back further. You know, I mean,
Yeah, I
when
want to
I
hear
first,
that. I want to hear that.
I mean, all the way back, really to when I was maybe in the equivalent of middle school or something. I was babysitting for some friends in the neighborhood, and they had a Shakyamuni, a beautiful carved wooden standing Shakyamuni
Mm.
that I would stare at. I would just looked at it, and it made me feel good looking at it.
Where was
And
this?
this was in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia,
Mm.
and then later, when I was in college, I was really focused on philosophy. I studied Indian philosophy, read about Buddhism, and I went
Where'd
to
you go to college?
I went to Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
They had this work study program where you go to the campus for a few months, and you go out and work, and then you come back for 6 months, and then you go out and work for 3 months or 6 months,
Yeah.
and a year abroad. And I was studying sitar by then with Nikhil Banerjee, and I arranged for a year abroad, which kind of ended in a little bit of a debacle in that I was not part of any program. I just went. And I ended up studying with Annapurna Devi, who was at one time was married to Ravi Shankar. She was Ali Akbar Khan's sister. And so I was living in Bombay and studying with her, but living in Bombay, I was totally isolated. It took me 3 trains to get to her apartment in Malabar Hill. And so it was just unsustainable.
Why didn't you move over there?
Well, India is not an easy place to be, for sure.
Yeah, I've spent time there.
Yeah. So I went traveling, and I felt a little bit crushed that I hadn't been able to fulfill the dream, so to speak. And I ended up going to the Sri Aurobindo ashram in southern India in Pondicherry.
Yeah, I've been there. That's very cool. Wow.
I met some people traveling who kind of directed me. I met this one guy who seemed really, really into the sadhu thing, and he gave me a number of places to visit. And that was the first one I went. And
So you were in what's it called, Oroville?
I did visit it. I mean, when I visited Oroville, it was nothing but the very center of it, the very spiral center, there, and a few people living around it. It was just beginning.
When did Sri Aurobindo die?
Gee, I don't really know for sure, to be honest with you. I mean, it was many years before I arrived there.
Oh, well, no, I think he died in the 50s. All right.
And the mother was still alive, and I actually did have an audience with her. Well, I had an interesting experience. I arrived in Pondicherry, and I was sick. So I had to stay in a hotel for a couple of days before I recovered, and then I was admitted. Not monastery, it was what do you call it? Ashram.
Yeah.
Of course. And, so I went in, and I was talking to a librarian there. It was an English gentleman, and he was telling me that he had had cancer and was given just months to live, and so he decided to come to India, and it had been like 11 years since since then. And he asked me what I was up to, and I said, I'd come to study music. And he kind of got this faraway look in his eyes, and he said, you go over, sit down there. And he put me in front of a tape recorder, and he played a recording of Ali Akbar Khan. And I had this very profound experience that everything was okay. Everything was going to be just fine. It was very beautiful and overwhelming. And so I felt, something had stirred in me that was profound. When I came back to Antioch, I I met these people who lived in a geodesic dome in the woods outside of town, and they would pick me up every Wednesday night. They were students of Yasutani Roshi, and they would pick me up every Wednesday night, and I would sit with them and chant with them, and then they'd bring me back. And then when I graduated, which was 1970, I came to Berkeley, and I started sitting in the Berkeley Zendo, and Mel said you could go to the city to be a guest student for a week. And I thought that was a good idea, so I went, and I ended up staying for 6 years. In Zen Center. Yeah.
You stayed where for 6 weeks?
6 years. I
6 years?
Years
And Mel said, I just missed, where did you go to be a guest student?
In the city.
In the city, yeah. I just want to make sure that.
For a week, and I ended up staying
6 years. Now, what are the years of this? What year did you go to India?
That was spanning part of 67 and 68.
Incidentally, I love Pondicherry. It's really a nice place. So French.
Yes, I have vivid memories of the light in Pondicherry, the way the light would shine. I remember the shutters of people's windows being painted, beautiful blues and greens and reds.
Yeah.
So it's a lovely, lovely part, especially of course the older.
It was really different, and it's like a separate, whatever they say, province or whatever. It's very small. It's near Chennai. I was at the Ramana Ashram in Tiruvannamalai. Did you go there?
No, that was the only ashram I stayed in. I did go to I can't remember. I went to Madurai, the temple town. I remember visiting a Hindu temple there. Yeah.
Well, okay. So and you went back to Antioch. And now, how did you get to Zen Center? What was that?
Well, I don't know how I knew about it, but when I came to California, I had two things in mind. I wanted to study music, and I wanted to study Zen.
Yeah.
So I found the Berkeley Zendo one way or another. Don't remember how exactly. Yeah.
Good place to end up there. Yeah. But you didn't end up. Good place to land.
For sure.
And that was, what year was that?
Well, that was 1970.
So, all right. So, what happened there?
Well, not a lot that I recall from Berkeley. I mean, my memories are really centered in Zen Center, Tassajara, and Green Gulch.
Yeah, sure.
Time I spent.
What happened there?
I should just preface it all by saying that certainly the most, in so many ways, the most profound and wonderful thing that has happened in my life. I think everything that followed, good, bad, and neutral, has been influenced by it. And what I mean by that is that, life is not always straightforward, right? But it's something that has stood me in good stead. I don't know how else to say it, but it helped me tremendously. I mean, if you remember the text of the time, the Vietnam War was going on. We were potential fodder for the war machine. There was a lot of freaking out. There was a back to nature. There was, I certainly would consider myself to have been a hippie. When I showed up at Zen Center, I had hair down to my shoulder blades. I remember, I'd been at Zen Center for some time, and I used to ride the trolley on Market Street. I don't know where I was going, but I kept going back and forth, and I would see this barber shop, and I saw this one barber who had a beard, and I thought, oh, well, he can't be all bad. And so finally I plucked up the courage to go in, and I said, I want to cut my hair. And he said, are you sure you're ready? So he actually sent me home. It was very fun. He sent me home. And then I came back, and I had him progressively cut my hair shorter. I didn't do it all at once. And that felt right. That felt right. And so I was at the City Center for 2 years. Suzuki Roshi was there, of course.
What do you remember about that?
Well, I remember, so many of his lectures just sitting there. I remember the feeling of things, it was very gracious in so many ways. And one story that is pretty vivid is I was Jikido, and I was sleeping in the Zendo the night before session, and I'm gently nudged awake, and it's Pat, I can't remember her last name, who was Suzuki Roshi's attendant.
Harrishoff.
She was awake. Pardon?
Harrishoff. Pat Harrishoff. Oh, she was older.
Older, yes. I saw a photo of her recently, I think, on the Cube site or somewhere. And she was waking me up. Suzuki Roshi was offering incense at the altar, and we were the only people in the Zendo. And that was very confusing to me. Why was I being awakened, and why was he already here? And, So it turned out that particular sesshin, that first day, the person responsible for ringing the bell had gotten up an hour early and rung the bell an hour early.
Yeah, and that was Mel.
That was Mel. I didn't know that. And evidently everyone went back to sleep.
Right.
Because, it wasn't time, but Suzuki Roshi was there. And I remember this probably famous story, that I remember since I was Jikido, I was sitting right by the door on Laguna Street, but I could hear him from inside, and his voice was raised, and I remember him saying, this is the only moment there is. You shouldn't expect a single moment more. And he got off his seat, and you could hear him hitting everybody in the Zendo, twice on one side, twice on the other. It's pretty strong when he started, but by the time that he got to me, it was like a little tap, 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 tap. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very, many people have different memories of that, but you got one from the inside. You were in there sitting.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. I think Mel went around telling people, oh, it's a mistake, and go back to bed. And
God.
And then, Suzuki used it as a teachable moment.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Neat. What more?
Oh, my goodness. So one time at Tassajara, I was late to the Zendo, and my brain, I don't recall exactly. I'm conflating both Silas Hoadley and Peter Schneider, and I'm thinking it was Peter Schneider, maybe as a guest Eno or something. So I was
Peter
late,
Schneider.
so
what about Eno?
Well, one of the two of them was the person who was, headed to the Zendo to officiate.
Oh,
but
the Dochi.
Okay, I was late, and so I was behind the Jisha.
Oh, yeah.
And it started to hail, and he had an umbrella, and he turned the umbrella upside down and started collecting hail in it and laughing. I thought that was the most amazing moment.
You're talking about Suzuki Roshi.
No, I think it was either Silas or Peter. I can't remember who it was, but vivid memory. It was kind of a joyous moment.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm trying to think which one of them would have done that. I think Peter.
Yeah, I think it was Peter. For the longest time I thought it was Silas, but I thought no, Peter was the one. Peter had such a brilliant personality. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I think it might.
Yeah, I think Silas was like steady and
Yes.
just would have kept going. Peter was a little more quirky or something. Yeah. Haha. That's good. That's good.
That is a great moment. I was thinking just as you called, I was thinking how.
Oh, right. You said Peter was the doshi, so Suzuki wasn't there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think he was the official anything. So that's why I think maybe he was visiting, but I can't remember. It's too far back in the mists of ancient history.
Well, now wait a minute. You said he was officiating.
Well, yeah, because obviously he was the person coming into the Zendo to
Yeah, so Suzuki wasn't there.
No, he wasn't there.
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah, I'd forgotten that already. That's cool. That's cool. I like that.
I mean, what I was thinking was that we all shared these experiences, but at the same time, I think everyone had a completely personal experience of what happened, of what they were going through there. I can tell you another story that's pretty prominent in my memory is I used to carve things out of manzanita.
Yeah.
And I would carve them very smooth and then sandpaper them with 80 grit, 120 grit, 320 grit, 400, 600, and then I would oil them.
Right.
And so I have two stories. I have two stories about carving manzanita at Tassajara.
Let's hear them.
One, I carved a wooden egg for Charlotte Selver.
Huh.
And I went around. I went around and I asked everyone to rub their nose on it. Don't ask me where I came up with that, but needed oil. I thought, well, let's ask everyone to do this. So when I went to give it to her as a gift, we were having a class. It must have been nighttime. The moment I handed it to her, the moment before she knew what it was, the lights went out. And so all she did was feel it. And she squealed, delight. She squealed in some kind of wonderful sound. So that for me was a wonderful memory. And then the second story about carving manzanita was I had made a nyoi for Richard Baker for his birthday, and I worked on it for a long time. And it was a nice shape. It came out really nice, and it was very smooth. And we had a dinner party, and Yamada Mumon Roshi was visiting then at Tassajara.
Oh.
And I handed the nyoi to Richard Baker, Roshi, and he looked at it, admired it, and handed it to Yamada Mumon Roshi to look at. And, I didn't know what had transpired, but later Baker Roshi, called me and said that, he had shown it to Yamada Mumon Roshi, who had admired it, and he said the proper protocol would have been for him to offer it to Yamada Mumon Roshi, but he said he couldn't bring himself to do it. So now he was tasking me with making another one.
Oh, that's nice.
So he had found this gnarly piece of manzanita up at Suzuki Roshi's ashes site, and he wanted me to make it out of that. And I thought, oh, this is so important. I have to consult with Baker Roshi. So I think once a week I would bring it to him. We'd talk about it. What would I do next? You know, all of this effort put into it. At the end of the day, it was unusable. And I had to start over again. And this time I just did it on my own. I just said, I have to do this completely on my own. And I carved a nice shape, but there was something that was missing. And I had an idea what I might do, but I wasn't sure if I should do it. And I showed it to Fran Blanco. You remember Fran? He was a painter, an artist. And I said, I'm thinking of doing this one little detail on this, but I'm afraid I might ruin it if I do it. And she said her painting teacher had told her that the difference between, you know, a great painting and a pedestrian one is a risk taken. And I thought that was really interesting advice. So I went ahead and did it, and it worked out. And we sent it to Japan, and we got a letter back saying it was splendid. And I think that was a wonderful lesson for me to learn to trust myself. You know, but I have to defer to some other authority because this is so important. And then I realized, you know, at the end of the day, I have to direct what I'm doing from myself. So that was a good learning experience. Yeah.
Well, please continue.
Well, I have some other stories. So another story was so I was having in San Francisco. I was coming through the swinging doors between the kitchen and the dining hall.
Right.
And I went through the doors, and I let the doors swing behind me. And at last minute, I went, oh, my goodness, you know, there might be somebody behind me. So I reached back, and I caught the door. And at that moment, the muffin fell off of my plate onto the floor. And Huitsu-san was right behind me. And without missing a beat, he picked it up and put it on my plate and took the one, took one from he put it on his plate and took the one that was clean from his plate and put it on my plate.
Ooh, good for him.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Also, I can brag that I gave Vanya Palmer's Zazen instruction when he first came to Tassajara.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you should go visit him. He lives in Luzerne.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
And he has a retreat in the Swiss Alps above Lake Luzerne that called Felsentor. That's really, really unbelievably beautiful location. It's staggering. And he just bought an old hotel, and Paul Disco built he was in charge of building a traditional Japanese zendo behind the hotel. It's really an amazing place. And there's a sort of community there.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another Tassajara story.
Yeah.
So, it's been a long time since I've been there. I don't know if there's still cabins up on the hill opposite the old Zendo, but my cabin was up there.
Sure there is. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was during lunch break. And Michael Jamvold, his room was on the other side of the wall from my space. I can't remember if I had a roommate. I might have had a roommate. I probably did.
Those were pretty small, those rooms.
Yeah. So it was lunch break, and Michael and I were kind of arguing back and forth whether it was okay for a Zen monk to lie down during the day. With Michael being opposed to the idea. But so we're going back and forth about this. And then someone piped up from another cabin, "Will you guys please be quiet? I'm trying to take a nap."
That's good. That's good. Well, Michael was strict.
Yes. Michael was a Zazen aficionado. I mean, I remember that he would practice in his room in addition to all the other periods during the day.
Yeah.
At Page Street.
Yeah. Toward, at the end of his life, he has passed on.
Yes, I heard.
Yeah, he was in Japan, and I visited him several times there. He just sit so much. He got this temple, I think Hoitsu, he got it for him, and he was like a caretaker of it in Shizuoka. And he told me he'd just sit all day. And, yeah. Anyway, he was a character.
Was he happy?
Happy? Michael was never happy. Michael was tortured.
Oh, God.
His father died cursing him and his sister, and that was a hard one to live with.
Goodness, I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. It's sort of maybe Scandinavian, sort of severe upbringing. But he did well with it. He handled it well. I mean, he had a sense of humor. Oh, once he was visiting us, Elin, my prior wife, and me, and our son Clay in San Rafael. This is about 95, so Clay would have been 4 years old, and he was with Clay in the living room, and I was back in the kitchen or something. I was gone for a while. When I come back, just as I enter the room, he says to Clay, "And if you tell anyone, I'll kill you." So it's just the timing of it was so great. I mean, he had this dark sense of humor.
I
appreciated it. Huh?
You mentioned he was in Shizuoka. That's like halfway to the west from Tokyo, isn't it? Somewhere out that way.
Shikoku.
Shikoku.
If I said Shizuoka, it was a mistake. He was in Shikoku, the smallest of the four main islands of Japan. Shizuoka is the province where Suzuki came from, and the main town, the big town near Yaesu, which isn't tiny.
So I forget the year. I think it was it 2010? Dan Hicks had a tour in Japan. I flew out with them, and I have business in Japan because I import some audio products from there. And they played in the Blue Note in Tokyo, and I sat next to a tea farmer from Shizuoka who knew more about American music than I will ever dream of knowing. It was pretty amazing.
I experienced that in Japan. That there'll be people, some group or some certain amount of people that are more into what's happening in America in some nook or cranny of our culture than people in America. I mean, Japanese, I don't know about now, but have bought more jazz albums than anyone. I did an album of experimental, like rock and roll, underground type music in 86. And in Japan, I've got a bunch of records left. And Japan, they ordered 3 cases of them last year.
Really?
When I went to Japan, I'd been spending time in the underground music world, and I'd been making music, different types, not just the underground type. And so I got in with this sort of art crowd in Tokyo for a while. I didn't stick with it, but I was around for a while. And so I played some really bizarre stuff I'd done, but it's all song based, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a guy listened to it and he said, reminiscent of Tuxedo Moon. And Tuxedo Moon I just loved it. But it was hardly anybody in America knew who Tuxedo Moon was. They were like San Francisco based underground, new wave music.
Later, were they in the 60s or later?
No, this is 80s.
Tuxedo Moon in the 80s?
Oh, yeah. Their great song was What's the Use? And Winston Tong was the lead singer, and I got to know him later. Anyway, and I would run into that. Alan Sinaka, does, is the abbot of the Berkeley Zendo now. He does sort of bluegrass, folk type music. And I'd go to concerts of his in Japan. He'd always have a good following. A lot of people were into it,
Well, in Tokyo, I mean, the line of people to meet Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks was 2.5 hours. I mean, just one after the other, very patiently waiting. So people who are fans are really, really into it in Japan.
Yeah.
And it seems that there are people that there's a tradition of really specializing in some narrow range of a field.
Yes.
I heard of one gentleman whose life goal was to make the very best R-core transformer for an amplifier. I mean, that was his reason for being in life, was to make the best transformer. And there are people like that for sure.
Yeah. And that's really a insightful comment about Japan. In America, the idea is more to keep going and becoming bigger and better and know more and do more. There, the specialization is really important, and being satisfied with doing one thing as well as you can. And I think it's less competitive than the way we think of it. We're always thinking of the best. They just think of doing it as good as I can.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. So I had a big hand in conceiving of and designing a loudspeaker based around a speaker driver that I had been importing from Japan from this company in the kind of in the Japanese Alps near Mount Fuji. And they make what's called a field coil driver. This is the old technology. Before we had Alnico magnets that were strong enough to be passive magnets for loudspeaker drivers, they had to use an electromagnet. It had to have a power source. It's a good way to. It's inefficient, but it's a good way to make a loudspeaker because there's a lot of control over the driver. So this particular company was making this exotic driver that the paper for the cone is made by a 9th generation national treasure paper maker, Mr. Ichibei Iwani. The frame of the driver is machined from brass, and gold plated and then coated with 20 coats of urushi lacquer.
That's great.
and every detail about this driver is just to the max. We built this loudspeaker. It never became a commercial item, but we did manage to get kind of an honorable mention in a book by the Absolute Sound magazine. They had a book called The Illustrated History of High-End Audio, and the loudspeaker edition were in there under Wonderments and Oddities. So that's something I'm happy about, and it's in my living room, and it's freaking awesome. It's just unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
If ever in the San Francisco area, please come visit me.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Same here. I've been involved with recording here, and I have studio speakers. And the engineer I work with, I bought him some things to then he pays back by engineering, music of mine. And one thing he got was some cables that were specially made by some audiophiles, and like over in Chandidasa or something. It's but I don't know anything about it, but you would probably understand. I'll send you a link to their website. They're fanatics. But this is audio to go from mic for the mics, the cable for the mics. I think that's all it was for. And of course, the mic in recording is the most important part.
Well, what's interesting in any system is that every part matters.
Yeah, of course.
And that's where, people who are, fanatic about it just drill down into every aspect they can figure, vibrations, interaction of electromagnetic fields, construction. I mean, all of these things add up to the final result. And what it is we're trying to do at the end of the day is to allow the maximum amount of the signal that was originally recorded to come through. And what's surprising is how much information really exists on a CD or on an LP. It's astonishing how much information is there.
You said an LT?
Yeah, an LP. Remember?
Oh,
those?
an LP. LP. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah. It's sort of amazing to think of it like on an LP or on a CD or a DVD, just these little grooves. How could they? And also, if you just look at wave files and think, wow, that's carrying all that information and puts back together into a song or a movie. It's amazing.
Amazing. It is.
I think you might have a better understanding of it than me. To me, it's just magic. I have no idea what's happening or how that could be.
Yeah, it gets pretty technical for sure.
Wow.
So what? I had a stereo system when I was living at Page Street. It was a Pioneer. It was a higher end Pioneer system, and I had a turntable, and I used to play records. And I remember that one time David Silva asked me if he could play some music in my room, and I think I was away from the city or something, and I said sure. And when I came back, evidently I was in trouble because they were playing loud music in there. I guess Grateful Dead for sure, knowing David. And ultimately, I sold that system to Baker Roshi.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So, you got money from him?
Yeah.
Whoa. That's one for the record books.
my profession. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Very good. Very good. Well, what's your feeling about analog versus digital?
Boy, okay. So, up until a couple of years ago, I was pretty much solidly in the camp that analog is the be all and end all. And in some ways, it still is, because there's nothing that can replicate the organic feel of the sound. But I have to say that the advances, not necessarily the latest technical advantages, but one designer in particular whose work I'm importing from England has opened, my mind and my ears to the potential of digital reproduction. And so it's just amazing. Both are amazing in their own way.
Uh-huh.
Done, if it's done right, it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, there was a big controversy recently because Mobile Fidelity Records, which is just up the road from me in Sebastopol, for years, and their reason for being was to take original analog masters and transfer them directly to LPs. But in recent years, it wasn't known, they weren't telling people that they were doing an in-between digital process.
That's right.
The scandal was not that they were using a digital process. They could have been forthcoming about it. The scandal was they didn't tell people, so people didn't know.
That's right, yeah.
Quite a brouhaha, yeah.
Yeah, one guy wrote something about it, that he suspected it just from listening to it. Do you know who that was? I mean, do you remember that? And people were putting him down, saying, no, it's the real thing. And finally, somehow, it came out that they were doing that. Maybe not with all of it, but with some of it or something. And it's like they were the big thing in the world, right?
Well, yeah, they certainly have a big presence. I mean, there's a number of companies that do that, but they have probably the biggest presence. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Mm. So, what's your? Do you have any opinion of, the time to make the analog master from them? These are very old, mid '80s cassettes, is when it's digitized. Because I'm having them digitize them here, so we can remix them here.
There are processes that can help within the digital format to help clean up some of the noise, et cetera, from old recordings like that. I'm not really expert in that side of things, but when you're dealing with recordings that are noisy, it's probably not a bad idea to employ some of that if it's affordable.
Yeah, no, we do that here. I want them just straight digital copy.
Yeah.
I don't want them to mess with it because I don't necessarily agree with their noise reduction methods.
Yes, I can appreciate that. I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was looking at an interview with Rick Rubin and Neil Young, and they were talking about how this latest Neil Young recording, that they put everything down on analog tape, but they had to get it digitized immediately after, because they said that the sound changes within minutes of recording to the tape. And I thought that was an interesting thing. So they got all the tracks down immediately into digital format, did all of their mixing, and then I think put it back onto tape for the final mastering, and then onto however they made the recordings. I thought that was
Ah,
interesting that they felt that it's not just year on year that tapes deteriorate, but minute by minute. And I thought, wow.
wow. Wow, that's interesting. Um, I remember I used to know Taj Mahal, and he
Oh
invited
yeah,
me to come to a concert of his where they were making it was direct to disc.
yes,
You know about that, right? Where they make
of
the
course.
master record at the concert. So, what do you
Those,
think about
those are
direct to disc?
those are the best sounding recordings,
Mm,
direct to disc.
mm.
You know, um, I have this recording by Victor Feldman that's direct to disc. I was just listening to it the other day. And, you know, this is true of my system anyway, that it makes things very lifelike. But you would believe that that it was a real kick drum that was activating the air in the room. I mean, it was just so amazingly present.
Ah, that's interesting. One thing that uh, I think about talking to you about this is that uh, you're both a musician and an audiophile, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And uh, it's interesting. I have known engineers who work with there's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of audio equipment, making the best recording possible. And I go visit them in their homes and bring them something, and they bring this crappy little thing out to listen to it. I'm not an audiophile. Uh,
You're
I,
better off.
yeah, I have high end speakers. I mean, not high end in your terms, but
Yeah.
they're studio speakers, and they're pretty good. But I have some $15 earplugs that give a really good balance of the bass and the treble. And my high end speakers emphasize the bass so much that it didn't really show how most people hear it, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
and I was involved with building Studio D in Sausalito, and Nils Holm built the boxes for their back in 1982 $10,000 speakers, right? Uh,
So is Studio D, was that part of the record plant or is that a
it was
separate facility?
started by some people who had been involved with the record plant, and the record plant had studios A, B, and C, but they didn't
Mm.
have a big room for the big room
Mm.
sound. So Studio D was the big room sound, and they got a lot of big people in there. Uh, and But they had a little AM speaker, and they had different levels of speakers. They
Yeah.
had these big, giant, high end ones, and then they had more like what I've got, like studio speakers that are like a foot tall or something like that. Then they had this little tiny speaker in the middle because they'd want to hear what it sounded like for AM, and then they do special AM mixes.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Uh,
makes sense. It
yeah.
definitely makes
Hmm.
sense.
All right. Now wait a minute. I've gotten this way off because I was interested in all
Yeah.
that. Uh,
That's fine.
and now where
Fine.
were we? Oh, you were a Zen Center, and you had these speakers. Oh, and you sold them to Dick Baker. Wow, pretty good. So,
Yeah.
can you continue on from there?
Well, boy, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are a few incidents that occurred, you know, that are memorable. Um, One time, Philip Whalen and I were serving in the Zendo at Tassajara, and we got this serious case of the giggles.
Ah.
And you know, it was all we could do to contain ourselves. And later, he handed me a poem that said, "It is nothing at all that makes us laugh." I don't
Mm.
know if I paper. I wish I did, but I certainly remember that.
Oh, he gave you that and you lost it.
Maybe, I don't know, unless it's, it might, there's a folder it might be, and I have to go look.
Yeah, you got to find that. Send it to me if you do. Mike Dixon was having dinner with us in Sevastopol, and he did a little scribbling of me on a bicycle or something like that. And, I thought, wow, I've got a Mike Dixon, and I had actually bought one of his back when they were affordable. So I had this nice little picture, and somehow it came off the wall at one point. I remember painting or whatever, and rats ate half of it, and it was a great tragedy.
Yeah. Another thing that stands out is working with Joshin-san, sewing my. And she was so lovely. I mean, she was this sprightly, diminutive character, and I took her to a concert of Nikhil Banerjee, my sitar teacher, and she loved it. And I gave her a record, and I remember that she just played the hell out of it. I mean, she probably wore it out. And then after I'd left Zen Center, I don't remember what year it was, but I came back to visit, and she was there, and I went to see her in her room, and she offered me her bowls, her eating bowls.
Goodness, that's really something.
I just didn't feel that I had earned them, so I declined, and I found out later that Blanche had got them, and that seemed appropriate to me.
Yeah, I can understand you feeling that way. Yeah, Joshin-san, you sold a Roxu with her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You remember her missing finger joint?
Yes, right. Oh my goodness. That was how she wanted to switch teachers, and that was her offering.
And I was taking it pretty seriously. She cut off like half a finger. I mean, she's not Yakuza. I don't know if she had to do that, but Lord, man, Japanese can really take things seriously.
Wow.
Americans would say, oh, hey, I really enjoyed studying with you. I think I'll go study with so-and-so now. Bye.
See you later. Yeah, I'd forgotten that part about it. Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah. She was wonderful. She sewed an okesa for me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Nice. That was the okesa I used after that, because the one that I had made when I was ordained was a little crooked. And it was sewed mainly by Jeannie DePrima. But so I don't mean to criticize Jeannie. She did a great job. And it was older and everything. And Joshin-san's was a little different style. It was like really big and comfortable. She gave it to me for my Shuso ceremony. She surprised me. Like on the day of the Shuso ceremony.
Wow. Wow, that's really something.
Yeah, so, nice.
Do you have a practice there, a zendo, or what's going on with that? How is that part of your life now?
Well, the robes aren't. I haven't worn robes, wow, since I came back from Japan in '92. But I'm very happy with practice here. I sit every morning and do walking meditation. I've done bunch of Vipassana retreats. I like them. I don't see things the same way that they do, but that doesn't matter. They sit and all the Vipassana here that I've done, and I've done it with Myanmar monks at the traditional temple. There's other Vipassana here that done by Western trained people, and then they're probably fine. I don't know anything about them, but they do the ones I do. They do the Mahasa method, which is just like Zazen. It's just watching your breath go in and out with emphasis on your hara. Anyway, and yeah, and I got more into walking. I never was into gaining that much, but the walking meditation here sort of got me. Yeah. Anyway, I miss, I miss and I dream about community, but I really think it's unlikely to happen again like that. But we have community still in like this, so many ways.
Yeah.
And it all continues in various ways. Do you have? What about you?
Well, I haven't really had a Zazen practice for years. I'd say the closest I come now is practicing Tai Chi, which it comes so close philosophically because the condition that you're trying to practice is one of being completely open to change. Not necessarily being committed to the next movement. That it's changeable from anything to anything. So I like that aspect of it, and it does slow me down, and I do, focus on my breathing and coordinating with the movement. I mean, it's a very sophisticated practice that requires years of learning minutia of how the muscular skeletal system works together. So there's that, and I've been taking Feldenkrais classes, which also have some aspects of this, relaxing, deeply relaxing, and then activating only one muscle or one joint at a time. So feeling the effect of a gentle movement. So these are very body-based. But my feeling is, is that Zazen is the mother of all practices, and, I miss it. I'm not terribly disciplined. I don't get up early in the morning. Sometimes I'm up too late, but I think for me, it's kind of like riding a bicycle. You never forget how to do it.
Yeah, right. Right. You're one of the points of going to Zen Center and Tassara and all that is to bring your Zazen into your daily life. Or that's an essential element. It's not like one of many you can choose from. With the Tai Chi and the music and even the audio work, it sounds like you're being you're involved with concentration, awareness, and sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
Well, go on.
So I was going to tell you, I was at the Zen Center for the last year of Suzuki Roshi's life.
Yeah.
So I had the good fortune of having Dokusan with him once.
Ah.
And I had all the instructions. I was more or less kind of a newbie. And I did everything right going in. I did all the right bows and everything, and sat down, had a conversation with him, got up to leave, did the right bows leaving. But as I came to the door, I just opened the door and forgot I was supposed to bow at the door. So I turned around to bow, and he was doing a full prostration in my direction.
Hmm.
There were many amazing, wonderful moments. There were so many, so many of us who were going through all kinds of stuff, emotional stuff, growing up, relationships, all kinds of interactions. But I mean, the overarching experience was phenomenal, just phenomenal.
Hmm.
For me, at least.
Hmm. Yeah. And you, after he died, you were around because you've told some about that. So you came in 1970, and you said you were there 6 years. So, were you at Green Gulch any?
Yeah, Green Gulch was the last place I was before I left.
Hmm.
And I remember, I let Reb know I was leaving, and he said, out there you're lucky if you can go to church once a week. Here we are there every day. But I was ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where'd you go?
Oh, I moved to Berkeley. I worked as a carpenter. I actually, after I left, Paul Disco hired me one summer to work on his friend's house. I can't remember his first name, Wolf, the restaurateur.
Michael Wild.
Michael Wild. Yeah, Michael Wild. Yeah, that's right. And that was a great summer. I mean, I was so enthusiastic. He taught me how to plane.
Oh, that's great.
And I got pretty adept at getting, full width shavings that floated away in the air and nice mirror smooth finishes. It was wonderful. I loved the work. And I also worked on the Lindisfarne building for a little while.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Interesting building.
Yeah,
go on.
For the Michael Wild house, we drove up to Oregon to we're going to get Port Orford cedar.
Yeah.
Only all the Port Orford cedar that's grown in the United States is shipped to Japan. So I don't know how he did it. Paul was very resourceful, and he found a couple of standing dead Port Orford trees.
Yeah.
And we borrowed an Alaska chainsaw mill from somebody. We milled all these slabs.
Wow.
The guy that lent us the mill, I think on the last day that we were working, came and took us to his place, and he had this sauna that was just god-awful hot, and we got in and out of it, and he gave us some potent weed to smoke. So when we're driving back to wherever it was we were staying, we're driving past all these beaches, and the sun is beginning to go down, and it was absolutely stunningly gorgeous. And Paul was like fixated on driving. He was like stoned and driving, just totally hugging the road. And I kept saying, Paul, please stop. Let's go to the beach. Finally, he stopped, and we saw this wonderful, incredible sunset.
Ah, that's great.
Then the next day, we drove down to the California border, and we get to the border, and the agricultural control people said, you can't bring that in here. There's beetles in the bark. They inspected the wood. And so Paul said, well, how would it be if we went back into Oregon and chopped off all the sapwood? And the guy said it would be okay. So we offloaded every single piece, and with axes and adzes, we chopped off all of the
right there.
Well, I think we drove back to a beach or someplace and offloaded them, and then we.
Well, how did you offload it?
By hand.
Well, how big were they? There were two of you?
There were.
Oh, there were slabs.
slab. Yeah, they were already milled into slabs. We had done that.
Okay. I've seen
Yeah.
slabs that two of us couldn't lift, is what I was thinking of. But all right. So so you did that.
Yeah, and then we drove down, and the truck broke down somewhere, and it was a Sunday, so it took, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours for someone to come and, repair the wheel or whatever it was, and then finally we got back. That was an adventure, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, when you were working on Michael Wilde's house, did you meet his wife, Natasha?
I think so, yeah.
She's black. She was black and beautiful. Yeah. I loved her. She was so good. And she spoke Chinese.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. I got involved with her with some stuff with the U.S. China People's Association and trying to get Taj Mahal to China and some other musicians. Anyway, I really liked her. When Green started, there was this food critic for, I think, the Examiner, and he and his wife came to Green's, and they were sort of grumpy, and then I don't know how I knew it, but I called up Michael. And I told him they were there. And, there were some really good, well-respected food critics, but Michael said, not them. He said, they want free food. And, I remember the guy had complained to me about some stuff. So he said, look, here, I'll give you his home number. Call him up and butter him up. And that might help. So I did. And the guy said, well, we couldn't smoke. I said, well, actually, all you had to do was ask for ashtrays. You were in the smoking section. Oh, I didn't know that. And so I talked to him for a while. Then he said, well, I was going to give you a bad review, but I'll give you a good review now. That was all thanks to Michael. That was our first review, too. Yeah. So there you are. Oh, yeah, you were working on the Lindisfarne building. Whoa, the sound separation in that thing was non-existent. You could hear somebody turning pages in the room next to you if they were reading.
Interesting, yeah.
So, all right, so you come... So there you are working with Paul. What happened next?
Well, I mean, after that, I worked as a carpenter in Berkeley for a number of years, and then my dad offered me a job working for his business, which I did. By this time, I was married to my first wife and had my son, and I did that for a while, and then I did all sorts of things. I mean, I worked as a web designer, such as it was. I mean, I wasn't all that great at it. And around in the late 80s, I started playing around with making my own speaker cables. And
wow.
Really it was kind of a hit and miss affair. But I was making things that were better than you could buy commercially.
Wow.
Then one time I went to the, what is it called? The CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. This was 1992 or something. I met this gentleman from Italy who the sound in the room was interesting to me. And he said, it's all due to the cables. And I said, oh, really? I find that hard to believe, And he said, no, here, you take one home with you. And he gave me a rather expensive cable to take home and play with. And I became the distributor for that brand. And I came to learn that he was not the manufacturer. In fact, he was he was an importer himself. He was actually kind of charging me too much money for it. And I met the designer, who was a Japanese gentleman who at the time was living in Tuscany, in the countryside in Tuscany. And I had gone to visit this Italian gentleman. He introduced me to the designer, who said, "No, you should be buying directly from us. These cables were made in Japan." This designer was very unusual. He had a pair of speakers that were shaped like a cornucopia and covered entirely with cork, and he had built his own speaker drivers and so on. So I became very involved with his stuff, and I spent a lot of time with him, querying him, what principles was he designing around, what things was he, what was he focused on. And so I learned a lot from him. Then he later partnered with a man named Robert Churchill, who was a cousin to Winston Churchill, and they had this big to-do in England in a castle near Salisbury, and I went to visit there. But later on, we had a falling out over a transaction that I didn't think was fair to me, and so I kind of gave up on audio altogether. But after a couple of years, I thought, oh, well, I've got some stuff in the storage. Maybe I'll put together a little system. So I put it together, and I wasn't happy with the sound. So I started designing cables of my own. They were pretty successful from the very beginning because I was following principles. And then I just amplified what I had learned. I did everything to the max, the conductors, the treatment of conductors, the materials, the shields, et cetera, et cetera. And the very first design cable is more or less something I still build today, although with, some modifications. I have many other models that I've created since then, but that was kind of how that started.
Wow. That's really neat. That's so impressive. You know how most people hear music today? I mean, like most people in the world, I think, I'll be talking to some young Indonesian here, and they'll pull out their smartphone and play me something. That's the main speaker people are hearing on, I think.
The engineer that designed, the high-end speaker that I told you about, our speaker, he's now working on a design for Walmart. He can't really make a living designing high-end stuff, but he can make a living designing a speaker that's less than $100 for Walmart, or even less than $50 for Walmart.
Well, most people can't afford the thing to put those speakers with and don't have a place to live that's big enough. They just listen on their phone.
The expense can be just astronomical.
Yeah.
For super systems, I mean, beyond $1 million is not unimaginable.
That's great. Yeah. So, well, there's a market for that because there's so many rich people now, super rich, and they got to figure out what to do with their money. And so they tend to want to buy the most expensive. Some of them do.
Yes.
There's definitely a market for the most expensive things. They don't necessarily know what's most expensive. That in Japan, that's done a lot. Things are like very expensive, so they assume it's the best. There'll be whiskeys that are very expensive.
Okay. Yeah.
And
well, I got a phone call from a gentleman who was living in Hong Kong, who told me, he said, "I'm writing an article about Japanese audiophiles for the Wall Street Journal. Can I interview you?" And I said, "Sure, of course." There are a few quotes from me in that article, but one of the things that was so interesting, he was talking about these people in Japan who pay the electric company to put up a dedicated transformer for their house only. so that they will not
Go on.
so they won't get the noise from their their neighbors' refrigerators and skill saws or whatever is coming through. And there was one gentleman who his life passion was putting every resource he had into his stereo system. So the place that he lived was so tiny that every time he needed to get to the refrigerator, he had to move the couch.
Oh, wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's something. That's great. Wow. Huh.
Japanese audio. Yeah.
Huh. So now you're marketing stuff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you market it? Do you have a company that you could give me the name of? Do you have a website?
I do. My website is the same as my email. It's www.lotusgroupusa.com.
Oh.
And it shows it will show all the products, and then there's a blog section where I rant about one topic or another. And I used to go to trade shows, but since the pandemic I haven't gone, and of course they're very expensive, but I'd like to do it again when I feel it's safe, but it doesn't feel like it's totally safe yet. One of the people in my Tai Chi class caught it, and I said, "Where did you get it?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "Maybe it was in Costco or Trader Joe's." I wear a mask all the time, but nevertheless, he wears a mask. Nevertheless, he got it. So
yeah, masks have sort of gone out. I mean, people wear masks here, and so if I go to the bank, I have to wear a mask. We got national insurance here. We went to that building, wore a mask. In Japan, I just saw my best friends from Japan. Katrinka and I went to a booth and had dinner with them. They say everybody in Japan is wearing a mask all the time. Driving in almost everybody, driving in their cars and,
They still have a high rate, as I understand it. They still have a high rate of cases there.
Is that right? In Japan? Is that right? Well, they might be sort of like here that, and I've certainly noticed that in Japan, their behavior is generally dependent on whether they can be seen or not.
There's an upside. Would you consider the government there to be somewhat authoritarian? I mean, that's my impression.
Well, I don't notice anything. I don't notice anything in Japan either. I know Shunryu Suzuki, my dear friend, translator, said, well, Japan's a police state. You just never see any police. And that's what Singapore's like.
Yeah.
Singapore's great. They've got their famous $500 fines for this and that, but you never see a policeman. And we never see police here. I mean, the only time we see police is out on the highway. There'll be 20 of them together, stopping cars, checking registration. I've never heard of anybody getting a speeding violation or any type of moving violation.
This country here is really, really sick. It's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you know, but we had three maybe more, but three major mass shootings in the last couple of days.
Oh yeah. We get your news.
It's too much.
Yeah. An Indonesian I know is pretty savvy. He said it's never been better than it is now. He said there's more freedom of speech now, even though that they just passed a law you can't criticize. Oh, you can't slander, let's say, which is more, you can't slander the president or public officials. You can't slander religion. But I hear people doing it. I mean, they don't really worry about it, but, and they just made it illegal to have sex outside of marriage, and you can't live together unless you're married, and stuff like that. But they're not going to enforce it. They're just making the fanatics happy by giving them some laws. I mean,
I see.
there will be some enforcement, but nothing. It just seems fine. Everything seems fine.
That's great. That's great.
And they, of course, have plenty. Everywhere, there's plenty of problems.
Yes.
So, speaking of that, what do you think about climate change?
Huh. Did you see the movie Don't Look Up?
Oh, yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, we're careening towards something.
Yeah.
We're already in it.
Yeah.
We're already in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know what is the world going to do about it. The way that we've structured our societies and our technology and our business is just flat out unhealthy. I don't know what's going to change it. It seems like the vested interests aren't really going to ever really allow major change. We still, kowtow to Saudi Arabia. Oil is still king in some kind of perverse way.
Mm-hmm.
We can't seem to legislate our way out of a paper bag to save ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the prognosis is. I'm concerned for my son and my nephew and these young people coming up. What is it they're going to have to face? And I think it's literally going to be a whirlwind. The size of tornadoes is increasing, the size of storms is increasing, droughts and rainfall. I mean, all of these things that are just out of balance, and it all, to kind of tie it up in a bow, in a sense, it all comes down to our sense of concern for other people. Our willingness to entertain that other people, need to be taken care of and lifted up the same as we would want to be, and to focus on that rather than on profit and selfishness. And it seems like Jesus and Buddha were trying to point the way. He said, the way you guys are going is the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
Turn around, go the other way. And we haven't done it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, I have sons and grandchildren. Katrinka has a son. We have grandchildren with all of them. I think if we want to be positive, we have to look at a bigger picture and say that regardless of what happens here, we're all destined to be Buddha. Or that there's a bigger picture where everything's okay, but I don't think it's okay here. And maybe right now it is, but the prognosis does not look good. Doesn't look like we have anywhere near enough ability to deal with it as the human race.
Well, I know there's that story about Gary Snyder went to his Zen teacher, and he was in the 50s. He was in Japan, I think.
Yeah.
He went to teacher, and he said, if we don't do something about the planet, about the ecology, we won't survive. And he says his teacher said, no need to survive.
Oh, that's good. I haven't heard that one. I've heard the one where he said to his teacher, and I've repeated it many times, that he was involved with problems about the environment and this and that, and asked the teacher what he thought, and he said, well, there's two jobs for the monk, sitting zazen and sweeping the temple. So sweeping the temple is what people call engaged Buddhism. It's doing something. Of course, in Japan, in the first part of the last century, engaged Buddhism meant conquering Asia.
Yeah.
Combines rather than splits atoms, and doesn't have radiation as a byproduct. So that could change. And Don't Look Up. No, not Don't Look Up. For All Mankind, the series about, going to the moon and Mars and all that. It's a fictionalized version of it with a different history happening. Fusion solved the climate problem in it.
Fusion won't solve the climate problem because we'll just use fusion to continue business as usual.
That's right.
The kind of change that's required is a change of consciousness, a change of how we view what it means to be human on the earth and what it means to be a living being on the earth, and to really honor and acknowledge our interdependence. I love the Dalai Lama. He says, 8 billion people, one family. That's his message. He seems when he's speaking publicly, and he's talking to all sorts of people and from all walks of life. He talks very simply. He doesn't talk in technical Buddhist terms. He just says, it's real simple. You have to have the right regard for other people. You have to develop bodhicitta. You have to. And this is what can save us.
Yeah.
It's this awareness that we're not separate.
Yeah. Kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's hope for that. I'm always an optimist in the face of all this stuff that's happening. I'm an incurable optimist. So.
Yeah.
Could be wrong.
Yeah, I am too, but I'm sort of my optimism includes the total destruction of Earth as a total destruction of the biosphere. I still think everything's all right at that level, but it would be very painful and disappointing, an enormously bad thing that we need to do everything we can to avoid. An uprising of people, could change things. But not good deeds. I think we're beyond good deeds.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, it has to be structural. The changes have to be structural. And for that, I don't know. I mean, we've gone into some pretty weird places in the last number of years. So hard to say how that's going to be possible.
Yeah, it's really hard to see how it could be possible. Well, incidentally, I believe in good deeds anyway, even if it doesn't help, I get this image from On the Beach where, everybody on earth is dying from, I guess from a big war with Russia and the United States, from the radiation. And it takes place in Australia. And there's a scene where a guy has a sports car and he's, everybody's dying. He's going to be dying soon. He prepares his car like somebody would who's going to be gone for a year, disconnects the battery and, maybe took the tires off. I don't know. We covered it and stuff. And we compost and recycle everything we can. Recycling doesn't help them.
No.
I mean, but recycling is a failure worldwide now. America's recycling 5%.
It just might be that we are the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just might be.
Yeah. Well, but do you have anything to say on a lighter note to conclude?
Yeah. When I get up in the morning, the first thing I like to do is go outside in my pajamas and weed in the garden.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I think one of the things that has preserved my sanity during the pandemic is being outside, working in the garden, doing Tai Chi on the deck, breathing outside, watching the hawks fly overhead. These are wonderful things, and, take whatever blessings I can. And that seems to be plenty.
Yeah.
I don't think I need a whole lot. I'd like to be, I can't retire. I have to keep working. So maybe at some point we will, there's a possibility that we will, but for the time being, like to be free of financial worry. But other than that, I mean, things are good. Life is good.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. I love that image of you out there weeding in your pajamas in the morning. And where do you live?
I live in Black Point. Do you know where that is?
No.
So if you go north out of San Rafael past Terra Linda, and you come to 37 going east,
yeah,
there's about a mile east is some hills on either side,
yeah,
and on the right side where the Renaissance Fair used to be held years ago, that's Black Point. And so it's really, it's right on the bay. It's urban wild interface land. We're surrounded by oak trees, and we have a lot of deer and wild turkeys and even some coyotes these days. And we can walk right down to the bay. So it's very beautiful. It's quiet.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah. You get any mountain lions?
No, I haven't seen any. I've maybe heard of up on Mount Verdell there might have been a mountain lion sighting, but I haven't. Yeah.
Yeah. Katrinka was driving. I lived in John Terrence Barn for 9 years, up on the top of the ridge there in Santa Rosa, outside of Santa Rosa, and she was driving in one day, and a big mountain lion leaped in, like almost over the car in front. It leaped over and disappeared.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Every once in a while there'd be something like that.
I did see a coyote. I caught a glimpse of him, and boy, he was way bigger than I expected.
Oh, really?
He was crossing our property. He was pretty big.
Like a couple of years ago, I read they were they were bringing 500 king cobras in to stock the national forest because they were getting low on king cobras.
God, huh?
Isn't that something?
Well, it must have a profound effect on the ecology. I know there's this. You may have seen it. when they talked about the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And it actually changed the landscape. It changed the lay of the land. It had such a profound influence.
Yeah. There's what they've done in Yellowstone. I mean, there's studies of it. Everything the Forest Service was doing would have terrible effects. They decided to get rid of the wolves. That was a long time ago. It had a bad effect. Then they decided to get rid of the bears. And they told everybody they moved them off. They mass murdered bears. Like when I first went to Yellowstone, there were bears everywhere, and they were like, it was too much. You couldn't go anywhere, and people would get mauled by them because they would think they were friendly, and even try to take pictures with them with their family and stuff. The famous Leakey, they're all famous, I guess, was in charge of a huge national preserved area in Kenya or somewhere, and elephants. They wanted to stop elephants from destroying all these trees, but what happened is they in this very large area they didn't do anything, and they discovered it was all part of the natural ecology of the area, and everything the elephants were doing was beneficial. But if you just looked at one thing, it looked like they were being destructive.
So here's the connection with what we were talking about climate change, which is that the Earth has the potential to heal itself if given the opportunity.
Yes. The biosphere, yeah. I think of the whole universe as being a Gaia, like a living organism or something. That sort of thing is possible. Lovelock, who created Gaia, the theory of Gaia, where it was ridiculed at first and greatly respected at the end of his life, which was recently. He thought, he's the one that created that idea that the Earth is like an organism that takes care of self-balancing and everything.
Yeah.
But so he wrote Gaia, The Revenge of Gaia, and then he wrote Rough Ride into the Future, might have been his last book. And he felt he wasn't really pleased with all the environmentalism. He felt a lot of it was too much like a religion where people weren't being scientific enough or something. But he felt like that the best case scenario for us is like enormous disaster of climate change killing off 80% of the population, and then the 20% that survives creating a more sustainable and benign future. I mean, that's what he thought was the best case scenario.
Go back to living like indigenous people.
Well, probably not. There'd be some, but some things in common with that. Not like turning the world into a garbage can and a toilet.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
There I go again, ruining the atmosphere.
Yeah. I had a part to play. Anyway. So.
Well, Joe, it's been great talking with you.
Likewise.
Really.
So much.
Yeah. Well, I need a picture. Send me a picture. Yeah.
You mean a current picture of me?
Yeah, a current picture, last 20 years anyway. And a picture from like when you came to Zen Center or back then, if you have anything.
There's a photo of me in an early wind bell. I'm holding up a mop. I think I'm draining it, and my hair is still uncut. I have no idea which issue that would have been in.
They're all on Cuke.com.
Yeah.
But you don't have any old pictures?
From then?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if I have. I'll have to look.
Well, what's your oldest picture? What's your oldest picture?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. It's also disorganized. I'd have to look.
Do you remember Barbara Levansky?
Sure.
All right, she might have one. I always ask her. She's got like 70,000 pictures.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. She sometime mid-70s or something. All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. It's been really fun talking with you. And yeah, let's hook up if I get there or you get here.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been good. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So thanks a lot, Joe. Joe Cohen. And listen, if I need any high-end speaker cables, I know where to get them. You can check out Joe's high-end audio business, which is called the Lotus Group, Breathing Life into Music, at lotusgroupusa.com, LOTUSGROUP USA.com. And it really is a high-end audiophile site. I don't know what anything is they're selling. Listen to this quote. This is like a quote from somebody of what they thought of his piranha wire system. I am going deeper into the extreme zone through this Annapurna board by piranha wire. This nirvana belongs to the class of speechless products of the service of music. Piano tuner at Audio Exotics Forum. Anyway, it's pretty impressive. I just sent a link to my engineer here in Bali because he deals with some place like that and got some high-end cables, and I'm going to send that link to Joe. So, the Lotus Group, Breathing Life into Music. And I see right here, if you want to email, it's joe@lotusgroupusa.com. Oh, and here's another site that has an article on him. And this is pretty good. It's the Audio Beatnik. That's the audiobeatnik.com. And there's an article called, and it's just right there in the link, Boppin' dash, and there's dashes between these words. Boppin' Novato Here Lotus Group's Granada Speakers. And that's something I should have said, is that I said I don't know what any of the things are. Well, that I was looking at his site. I was just glancing. But speakers, yeah, they're really into speakers. I should have said that, but now I've said it. All right, it says, Joe Cohen of the Lotus Group invited Becky and me to come over to the place, to his place, to hear his Granada speakers that he is putting back into production. So on a beautiful fall day in Northern California, Becky and I headed over to Marin to give them a listen. We had a great time getting to know Joe and listening to his wonderful system. Joe is without a doubt one of the truly nice guys in audio, down to earth and very knowledgeable. I particularly appreciated that Joe had such kind things to say about other speaker and cable designers. Joe started his audio journey as an audio hobbyist and freely admits that he isn't an engineer. In the 80s, he and some buddies got together regularly to listen to equipment. Quote, "We understood that cables could make a difference, but there were very limited offerings at the time," he said. He started playing around with building cables by buying every gauge of copper wire they had at his local Radio Shack store. The first cables he built were an improvement over what he had used previously. A friend's Litz interconnectors planted a seed in his mind as to how much difference cables make. A few more years went by and a few more lessons learned led to the development of his own prana wire. Anyway, well, I think that should be prana. Like in Hinduism, prana. In India, life force, the breath, vital spirit energy. It goes on. You can read it. That's really neat. I've known people into studios and work and stuff, but I didn't realize I knew a high-end speaker maker. Oh, and here I see that they're selling the Fosgometer, azimuth range meter. Pardon me. I love techie stuff that I don't understand just to glance at it. You know, it's one thing about phenomena, and it's like fractal. You know, fractal, you just keep going into something, and it just keeps like repeating, and you go deeper and deeper, and there's no end to it. That's the way phenomena is. You get into anything, you can just go so deep. And that's true. Every thought you have, every facet of existence, you can just go in and in and in and in and in. And it's endless. That's why, actually, my practice and what I believe in is being superficial. It's all right here on the surface, really. But of course, I appreciate every depth there is. It doesn't matter where you are in it, on the surface, on the bottom, at any particular place, or coasting around in it. Okay. Anyway, yes, thanks a lot, Joe. That was interesting. Loved the picture of Peter Schneider gathering the hail. And thanks for reminding me about Suzuki Roshi going around the Zendo whacking everybody, saying, you know, pretty much when the bell rings, get up, go to the Zendo. And don't forget, next week, part 2, Joe Cohen and making and listening to music. This has been a Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sonora with Doggy Bandita and sweet, lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.